What was your first experience with dance in Portland?
Well, I worked with Judy Massey as her demonstrator over at Reed College, and then I became a part of a collective and worked with her during the summer program that brought in people from New York. And then I became a part of Dancers Workshop, which was a collective that she originally began with Keith Martin, who had a company here a million years ago. And Dancers Workshop was a collective of 8 individual artists who not only taught in the space, but also made concerts and created work there. So it was a rehearsal space and a teaching space as well.
Wow.
We also had other people come in and do performances, but it was mostly just a home base for those 8 individual choreographers.
Nice. Where was Dancers Workshop in Portland?
It was a number of places. It was underneath the Burnside Bridge, 30 Northwest 1st, and then it moved to Jan McCauley's space, the old Cirque space, and then it moved into the old PCVA. So as rents went up and the spaces that we went into and took care of and renovated, we just had to migrate from place to place. So Dancers Workshop, I think, was in existence for about 20 years or 18 years. So, and there were people that came in and out.
Sure.
I moved to San Francisco and then came back, and a lot of people, moved and came back, but there was always sort of a home base feel there, as long as the doors were open.
Wow. About what years was Dancers, like 70s to mid-80s?
76 to I think like, I don't know, because I was in San Francisco, I think to 90. I'm not positive on that.
Around
that time frame, yeah.
Wow. How are ways that you would say the Dancers Workshop is similar or different from Conduit? Is Conduit serving the same role as Dancers Workshop?
Yeah, I would say that it was very similar. Yeah.
That makes sense.
And 8 individual people and not have any real figurehead and to try and be a democratic society. The meetings went on for a very long time. It was sort of like trying to catch squirrels at times, but ultimately everybody was really very supportive of each other, and we were able to create something out of nothing. We had a large student base, which were mostly adults. It was just a really vibrant, incredible time, because you just had to go out and ask to see how things were made and how they happened, and it was a pretty exciting time.
Cool. And you taught there and made work there? All right. Wow. Yeah. What are some of the works that you remember creating in that space that were highlights?
I did my first concert there called Esplanade, so that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then I worked with a man named Vincent Martinez, who was someone who had a strong voice here in the community. We did a lot of duet work, and I think we did like 4 concerts together there that were just duet works. And then as it migrated, I ended up doing 2 concerts with the man who's professor at Cal Arts, who danced with the Lemon Company, Colin Connor. And when it was your own space, you were able to really do things. Like we had a turn of the century sailboat in the space. We had it raining from the ceiling because we could do installations. We worked with a man named Jerry Mayer, who was an installation artist. John Virgin, who wrote operas. There was just a way, we stayed in the space until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. It was a very, very livable space, It was open all the time. So we had a freedom that comes with being young.
Yeah.
And comes with just making your dreams happen, because there's that energy and that time and that space and somehow that magical moments of where somehow those doors were open to you and you could run in them and sort of find your own voice. And that's what I think everybody that I worked with did, whatever that voice was. And we were very different. We were all really different. But there was something quite igniting about walking in and seeing somebody there at 2 o'clock in the morning, or at, 11 o'clock at night or in midday. And, we really tried to make space when we knew that each other had concerts coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that it was like a family.
Wow.
We weren't like super close,
Right.
but we were just really always curious and surprised by what each one was going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think just knowing that there was that kind of net, that underbelly of be who you are, find out how to make it come to life, and everybody was always there.
Wow.
So it was really, it's wonderful when there's that magic time where people really have a chance to be supportive of each other, but really allowing you to find your own individuality.
Who were some of the other 8 that were there making work with you?
Okay, well, there was Susan Molitor who did social dancing. There was Joe Morales who did cross-dressing and jazz, and there was Vincent Martinez who did very interesting work. There was me, there was Tracy Durbin who had flocks of people coming and taking her class, and she did jazz. Then there was Bobby Fowler who did African. There was Ruby Burns who did, African dance. Let's see, what else? I don't know. It was just a lot
incredible.
of different people. I mean, it was really a community.
So when you say it was a real mix, it wasn't just a real mix of contemporary dance. It was a real mix of people using movement as an art form.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
There were a lot of individuals. I mean, it was like the little United Nations because Portland wasn't quite as diverse at that time, And so that was really great, I think, for everybody to find a place where there was that sense of spread, because there wasn't a sense of competition. There was this real diverse interest in many kinds of forms of dance. So we weren't kind of locked into a certain aesthetic or, although we all had our own opinions about things, but there was a breadth of space in each one of those genres because we felt like each person. Susan Bonias was part of Moving Space. That was another place that was even before Dancers Workshop, I think. But there was theater dance, there was dance, there was. We didn't have too much ballet though. We never really had, because there were other people that could do it. OBT was there and they could do it in a much more fitting way.
Yeah.
So. We were kind of like the Little Rascals, the renegades, the people who would hang off the bridge. I mean, we had classes happening where, the windows would be open and people from the Burnside Bridge would be, calling in and watching what was happening. I mean, Saturday Market was happening, and there was Key Largo across the street, so that area was dicey, but it also had a real vibrancy.
Yeah. A lot of energy, people.
Yeah.
Did performances also happen at Dancers Workshop, or was that a rehearsal space and a class space, and then performances happened someplace else?
No, there were performances.
Okay,
I mean, that's what was great about it is, Zonnie Bauer was there. And she was part of PSU. So there was Reed College PSU. There were Zonnie, I remember putting nets up and crawling in nets. I mean, so we could change the landscape of the space itself, which I think was catalytic in us creating work that was environmentally based.
Right.
And, we could shift the spaces around, and we all understood that that's what somebody was doing. So your class would happen in a different area or space. I mean, it was like a shoebox. It wasn't as though the space had a lot of versatility.
Wow. Yeah, and you knew that somebody else would be having their class in a different way because your set was going to be there next month.
Right, and you just kind of was like, oh, God.
Yeah.
It's like with Joe Morales, there was always like more crap than you could imagine. I mean, it was each person brought their own stamp into what they were doing. So,
Cool. I want to go back a little bit and talk about, you brought up Judy Massey and Reed, and something that I'm interested in this Portland Dance Project is knowing that Reed had brought in a lot of people in their summer intensives and workshops. Is that something that you know about or participated in?
Yeah, I mean, it really changed my life because that's when I got to work with Jim May and meet Anna Sokolow and work with Anna Sokolow and watch her rehearse rooms and be a part of the performance at Riverside in New York. And at that point, I had been working with Vincent more, and we did more site-specific things and more like postmodern movement. And I went to Bennington and was exposed to watching Sarah Stackhouse do the dances for Isadora and learn Lemon's work and do composition with Phyllis Lamhut, who was a direct dancer, principal dancer with Alvin Nicolai when he was doing work. So it was really big, and Armgard von Bodlebon, who danced with the Graham Company, and then I got to do a piece on the Graham Company with Paul and Walter helping, facilitate that. And so I learned this whole other sort of traditional landscape of movement. And I had been exposed to that very early on when I studied briefly at the Center for Modern Dance Education, because that was in New Jersey, so a lot of people from New York would come. And that's what I think Reed was about. It was summertime, people wanted to get out of the city. Strawberry season was the end of June, and people, this is a beautiful place. So it was a great escape, I think,
for all these great resources. And then for you, it was a connection to start a relationship, to begin studying with a lot of different people that it sounds like throughout your career you led to bigger and better things.
Well, I just really ended up learning how to love musicality. And, I watched the Le Monde Company, and Pina Bausch was setting a piece on them at that time. And so there was just this somehow getting an opportunity to see that a lot of people work differently, but they were working. It wasn't like I spent time in huge amounts of time in class. I spent more time in the studio watching how people work, learning how to be in the rehearsal process, and then of course learning great dances that the Le Monde, Jose Lemon didn't really have a codified language. He learned about his work by his dances. Same thing like with Anna Sokolow, but same thing with anybody, same thing with Bonnie Merrill. I learned so much about how to look at people as individuals from Bonnie, and she could have 25 people in front of her, and she'd forget where she parked her car, but she would never forget who and what and where people were in space, and how to see the essence in their beauty come out. And my eyes started looking at more of, not exactly how people dance, but why they dance. And that came to be a more important thing to me.
Very cool. So the format at the Reed Summer Workshop, was it that there was a lot of repertory, like people would come in and build repertory or teach repertory? Or was that... They
did, but that was more at Bennington that they were teaching more repertory because the company was there, and there were exponents from that sort of lineage that were setting work. So it was more of like a think tank, and there were also musicians and painters, and it was just more of a conglomeration of thinking.
But you got to Bennington because of the Reed Summer Workshop.
Yeah, Judy Massey said, you've got to go and do this, and now's the time to do it. Because in New York, people were losing their spaces. It was a pretty grisly time. It was more of, the 80s. So it was great to be up in Vermont, in a beautiful area.
Wow.
But one thing leads to the next. That's why I think dancers feel propelled to always keep their feet in, and moving forward instead of taking a chance to step back and maybe look at things in a different perspective, because it's always like that, it's ephemeral. You do it and then it goes somewhere else, and so
whatever that experience is. So then the Reed Summer Workshops were really like a diving board for you in a lot of ways. Is that a good way to put that?
Yeah. I mean, I think each expression, each experience is its own diving board. It's just where it's set up in the pool.
That makes sense.
And one thing leads to the next, and who's to say that if you didn't do this great thing wouldn't have happened, or, that I think the perspective that dancers and creators have to take, in order to have an extended lifespan in this is that, it's always just about staying in love with what you're doing, and that's going to ebb and flow and change in different ways. But, it's about finding new ways to fall in love over and over again.
That's beautiful. Let's talk about Judy Massey. That's somebody that I really, just as I was starting to put the idea for this documentary together, was somebody on my list I wanted to talk to, and now I can't. But I'd love to know more about her. How would you describe Judy Massey?
Oh God, I think I'm going to cry.
I'm sorry, Josie.
Very unassuming, very quiet, worked really hard. She worked her way through college. She worked in a dinner theater. She studied with Luigi. She got her degree at Portland State. She was from a family of musicians. She was a writer. Her body kind of betrayed her in that her spine and her bones were very brittle. So, but you could walk into Reed and there'd be 55 people in class, and these were Reedies who at the beginning of September looked all bright and sparkly, and then come January they were fried because the academic pressure was a lot. But the classes were always really packed. And I think it was because people would walk into that space and for an hour and a half they could get out of their brain in a way that allowed them to feel joy and experience something different and feel like no matter what they did, it was valuable. She was really magical in that way,
Yeah.
And it wasn't as though she was a cheerleader. She always had this great kind of sense of humor, somewhat self-effacing, but she loved dance so much. And she really loved being in a room, sharing it with other people. I think that she had a hard battle to fight because Reed was such an academic institution, but yet, there were a lot of really bright people like Steve Jobs, who took a calligraphy class and took a dance class, and that's what allowed his brain to open up to think about creating what he created.
Yeah.
So I just feel really good about that because I think Judy had to try and constantly provide the intellectual value of what it's like to have it valued,
Right.
have it validated. I mean, and look at that performing space that they've built now. So I think Judy Massey is like quiet thunder. She just kind of rolled in, changed the open air space, and allowed you to feel fresh and breathe.
Wow. Do you know if she was the beginning of Dance at Reed, or was there...
No, Trisha Brown was the first person.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow. And then did Judy Massey come in after them?
Yeah.
Wow. Let's kind of move forward in time from after the dancers workshop. What came after that for you? Or maybe we can look at why did the dancers workshop transition out of being, and where did that leave you?
Oh, well, I was moving to San Francisco. So it was sort of like I was leaving the nest.
Yeah.
And Tracy had left, and there were other people that came in. Amy Bennett Gaylor was there, Joan Gunnis-Burns. Joan had danced with Eric Hawkins. She taught children's classes and was a master teacher with kids. I'll go, oh, I don't know how she does it.
Yeah.
I mean, and she would really teach them dance. You know, it was a creative movement, but they were doing things that were just, I mean, I wish my kids could have studied with her, you know. And Amy was like sweet cream. Everybody kind of went, you know, tried to continue with Dancers Workshop when it got into the PCBA building, and I was in San Francisco working, making dances, and then when I came back, the only thing that was here was OBT, and OBT was having a hard time, but Conduit, and that's when it was in the Southeast, in that little tiny space, Christy Edmonds and Linda. Mm-hmm. That was the only space.
Wow.
That was left, and this was after there was all this stuff that was happening, and then it seemed to just, you know, Joe was sick.
Okay.
Joe Morales.
Was that space called Coil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So it was like there was nothing.
Wow.
Yeah. PSU had closed down.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was like being in a I don't know, a Wild West town that had left. You know, it was really bizarre.
What brought you back to Portland at that time?
We were adopting my daughters, so we came back here and felt like it was a good place to raise kids. We had still had a house here, so we moved back. And
Totally not dance related. This was like a family choice to be here.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Uh-huh.
But then that left you with your career of dance in a city that at that moment was pretty void of dance. Mm-hmm. What did you look for dance opportunities, or did you put your focus elsewhere at that time first coming back?
Well, I knew that Joe was sick, and Sarah Anderson and Robert Guitron, who owned Polaris, lived in a space that was right near Coil, and I had run into them, and of course Joe was living with them. Both Sarah and Robert are extraordinary people that took care of Joe. And so I had been going really hard in San Francisco. I did, you know, I had a pickup company. I was teaching at UC Berkeley at Shaw Anderson. I had worked a real lot, and I just wanted to take some time off, and I could, because we were getting our house together, adopting a kid, and be with my friend while he was passing. And that was kind of going back to originally how I knew him as someone at Dancers Workshop. So I was fortunate that I was able to take the time and be with Robert and Sarah, and you know, the whole dance community kind of pulled together to help take care of Joe. And then, you know, he passed away. Oh, Bonnie Merrill was doing a big performance, and I don't really remember exactly what it was. But Joe was my partner, got too sick, became too sick to dance. And Bonnie had us all do the dance for him, and I got to do it by myself. But he was also losing his sight. He lost his sight in a matter of like 8 days. So it was just really interesting how everybody pulled together, and there were like 30 people, 28 people in this piece. What the hell was it for? I can't remember. Anyway.
Was it for Artquake?
It was maybe for art. That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Because we did it in the balconies.
Yeah.
And on the roadway.
Okay.
You know,
and this is different than the tumbleweed piece, because wasn't there like
I did the tumbleweed piece too.
Okay.
Yeah, but I wasn't in the tumbleweed. I got beaten up in the ocean. You saw that film, right?
I don't think I have.
Oh,
no.
You've got to see the film.
Where can I get it?
Bonnie has it.
Bonnie has it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have I'm gonna talk with her in the beginning of next month. So I'll make sure to ask her.
It's like an hour, which is really great because you get to see everybody.
Okay.
It's really, and she has us in the most fucked up situations.
That's great.
She had me in the ocean in February.
Oh God.
Yeah, and Carolyn Altman did a large part of that. So, yeah, just ask me about any time when there's been something that so I don't know. I think that there were just different ways in which the dance community migrated, you know, and evolved and morphed and survived.
And was there a re-entry for you back in Portland to teaching and performing?
Yeah, I did a piece called With, and it was about my daughter, finding my daughter. Mm-hmm. James Canfield hired me, and Ade Gutierrez,
That's quite a name.
to work with the younger kids, not the company, but they had like a pre-company. Mm-hmm. So I did With, and then I did a piece called Quiet Stories. And that's when Trey came and worked with the company too, Trey McIntyre. And so that was sort of James Canfield was always very supportive and kind to me about creating work. Nice. And then we went to the Joyce Theater, and then I did White Bird, helped me do a season with them, and so yeah, just kind of all
one thing into the next.
Yeah.
But that like LBT and James Canfield was your coming back to Portland.
Yes,
like really,
from San Francisco.
From San Francisco, yeah. That initial kind of
it was a new home base because there wasn't one.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I had done a lot of work in San Francisco, so I had a cachet of things to show to James. Mm-hmm. And hi, how are you? I had worked with, some really beautiful dancers there, and it was wonderful to have, that's where I met Daniel and Eric again, and so there are just all these different segues.
Right. That makes perfect sense. Very cool. And any moving forward, are there any projects that you're working on or excited about that you feel like talking about, or do you see like what are you hungry for now?
I've been spending time teaching, and I work with people from everyone from like BodyVox company to teaching to Portland Ballet. I work with those kids, and so the last 2 years I've really spent trying to figure out how people learn. Not only how people learn, but more interestingly, how young adults do. Because it's so easy for them to get discouraged, if there's one or two learning styles, and I feel like they're more than that. And how do you create a succinct environment so that people open up instead of shut down?
Yeah.
And so it's forced me into really looking in a different way, kind of codifying my own language, busting open beliefs that I grew up with as a young dancer, and just as a mother, as a teacher, as a artist myself. I do really like making work, though. I miss that. And even in my classes, I'm constantly sort of shaping things. But I wanted to get to a place of understanding, and I feel like I have a much more clarion idea of what that is than when I started on this venture a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So it's just a shift, I'm a million, I'm like 58 or something like that, and my body doesn't do things in the same way, but I can still move.
Yeah.
It's just, I also have, it's like creating a balance, I want to be with my kids before they're off at school and no longer. I mean, that's already happened with one of them. My children have always been a part of my dance life, and now they're both dancing as well, differently than I, but and my husband. And
yeah, of course.
it's how do you create a sense of where you can give what you need to give in order to do so in a way that's getting larger and more full and rich.
That makes
it's just finding a balance.
Perfect sense.
It sounds so cliche, but
it's life. And I think that, really focusing on like, how do you not just teach in a rote way or a way that you've taught in the past, but to say teaching is this process that you have to be critically engaged in, and the impact is real on people. How do you achieve that in the best way possible? That's an excellent question you're asking.
It's very, you know what, you just have to go in there and be really wide-eyed, and I think that that's the same thing with dancing. You know, only dancing I had control over in that I was in myself.
Right.
Now it's like it's a different experience, and I feel like it's time to go back in too. You know, it's always a state of shift and flow.
Right.
It's not as though there's anything that's nailed down, and what worked yesterday doesn't work 2 hours from later. You know,
Sure. What do you think dance in Portland could really benefit from at this point? What's missing that would help there be better education, better performance, better resources for dancers? What's the thing if you had X number of dollars and you could just make it happen?
No, I don't really think it's about money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, money is, it's a field that chews up money. You have to have it, you know. But I think what's happening, and you're proof of that in itself, is when I came back, I would go to the audience, I would go sit in a concert, and I saw not many generational experiences, you know, of people who have been in dance. I think what's lovely about now is you do have a generational expanse of people that have stayed engaged, invested, and committed to Portland. So it's not as though you're just staying in the same pool of thought. You know, you've got people that have had very vast and different experiences, and because they've been lived and experienced, so like him, I taught at Pacific University. It's like, you know, it's a compilation of all different places and times in your life that, you know, you can share with somebody that hasn't had that experience. So there are rungs on the ladder now that there didn't used to be. Mm-hmm. So I think people can climb higher with that information.
Uh-huh.
You know, and it's not only that it has to be written in stone that that's the way that it is. It's just having different perspectives. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's what was great about Dancers Workshop when I was there. Everybody was coming from a different angle.
Yeah.
So you didn't have to worry about fitting in. It was more about how do you create new territory.
That's a great way to put it. The freedom that you get from a lot of different perspectives is not having to feel homogenous in a way. Yeah.
And watching what people do, you know, and having a chance to be in a space where you get to see the evolution of that, where it's not like, oh, this is the product.
Right.
You know, and to realize that it takes a lot of work to get from here to here, and things look really shitty when they first start
Totally.
out, you know, and that there's a different way of looking good.
Yeah.
You know, and what you're trying to convey is by just being in it.
Great.
So,
very cool.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I've got 3 more questions, but before I do that, I want to give a little time check to make sure that we're good with time, and that I'm not overextending your time or availability today.
Yeah, I am sort of. Okay, we've got like 15 minutes. Is
Perfect.
that okay?
Yeah, that's great. It seems like through this documentary process, I've seen different organizations that were really valid and served a great purpose, like Dancers Workshop and the PSU dance program, all kind of like come and go. And I know that every situation has its own story, but why is it possible in your arc of being and dancing in Portland to zoom out and to be like, why did the Reed classes that were good, why did Dancers Workshop, why did PSU, all these programs established serve their purpose, but I think we'd love to have these resources still here today, but they come and go. Do you have a sense about why things that are helpful dissolve?
I think it's just, you know, everything has its own life, you know, and I think it's a mistake to hold on to something that wants to let go. And, you know, that's either just leaving or people changing, or, it's got to stay fluid. And you're talking about organizations that aren't owned by a specific person. And, very rarely do things stay on forever. And quite frankly, I don't know if that's really the best thing. For me, also just in making work, it's sort of interesting to take a step back and not be always, with your hands in the clay. I've done it for 35 years, and it's the first time I've really taken a break the last 2 years. And, not taken a break, but shifted the paradigm in how I look at how things are. And it's because I'm being influenced by this part of the generation, I think it's important to allow there to be a space where there's a choir. And, sometimes it means you just have to shift where the facility is and, what's resonating with people. I don't think that people, they're constantly looking for something that they connect with.
Right.
And there's, over time that changes.
Yeah. That makes perfect sense, that it's a dynamic structure, and so
Yes.
people's needs and wants and interests are going to evolve and change.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah, my daughter's involved in dance. She doesn't look at the same things that I do, and thank God.
Right.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so that's the answer to that question.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are there, so before we wrap up, I want to ask if there's any highlights or important things to you that we haven't talked about. Did we miss or skip over a section of your dance in Portland that you would like to talk about?
Oh, there's really nothing about, I just feel like in dancing there are moments that just let me know I'm alive. And, the exchanges that I've had with other people in this process are unlike any other. There's a kind of exchange that I don't really know how to articulate other than making a dance about it. And I've had a lot of nice times and hard times and elation in being able to work in that sphere.